Hey man,
What's up? How we doing?
I'm good, mate. How are you?
Good, man. Thank you.
Nice. Did you just come off a call?
Yeah, I had a call. It was like 30 seconds ago. I got off, so right into this one. But it was good. He's from Portugal.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, nice. What'd you guys chat about?
A couple different things, just some time management stuff. He had a young 12-year-old who had torn his ACL and just some issues going on with that where like the club that he's in was holding back and stuff. So mostly those two things were the primary topics. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, cool. I'll try and see if we could talk about something else. Keep
I mean,
keep it
yeah, we
brief if
can
we can.
we can go into whatever you want to go into. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I was kind of like approaching, like part of me was like, oh, let me just come in and just be very ad hoc and just kind of see what comes to mind. But then naturally, like past couple of days, like there's things that spring to mind that I'm like, oh, actually, this would be kind of interesting, to do and stuff. Um,
Mhm.
or interesting to chat about. So one thing I want to say like already from a lot of what I've gotten from following you, and I think you said this before, right? Like when it comes to rehab stuff, you don't necessarily have like a formal education, if you will, right? Like it's not like you went to like a university or anything and did like a typical kind of thing. And when I was thinking about this earlier, I was kind of thinking this is actually I feel like that's actually to your benefit because this kind of had me reflecting on like some of the stuff I learned at uni. Like, so an easy example is just, we were kind of taught, well, I was taught at the time, like, oh, gold standard, which I'm not a big fan of the terminology already, but like gold standard rehab for like lower back was like a lot of Stuart McGill stuff, right? And it's like at the time, it's like, okay, cool, like this makes sense. And then I started diving into it post grad. I'm like, okay, well, a lot of this is just on pigs and cadavers and like you have to get rid of all this tissue and then it's just like then you look at it for what it is in comparison to typical training and it's like okay this is relatively low load, right? So it just kind of had me thinking that if we just look at exercises as just a means to apply force to tissue and that's just is what it is, then it just doesn't really, you can always then place it in context, can't you? Whether it's going to
Mhm.
be good, bad, whatever. So that's all that really matters. So that's why I'm like I like a lot of the impulse stuff that you've shown. But if I actually bring this into some kind of question, um, when you go through, I suppose, more early stage rehab with people, how do you go about like, especially I feel like with online, how do you go about like addressing perhaps like early on like swelling issues with things like impulses and stuff, or do you tend to delay when you're going to introduce that depending on how they're presenting and what they can already do? Like, how does that typically look for you?
Yeah. So I mean, if they're having some massive swelling, or not even massive swelling, but if they're having swelling, if they haven't had full range return, we're usually not going to do impulses. Like it's going to be regress to the point where it's high volumes of movement, usually through joint moves.
Yeah.
So just for example, like let's say someone has a Tommy John has his elbow surgery, right? Um, for the first, I mean, it's different for everybody, but like basically until they get full range back, we're doing a lot of moves, we're doing a lot of pulse moves, we're doing a lot of holds without weight, just like getting into whatever range they can and looking to increase that over time and doing a lot of volume with that.
Mhm.
Generally, we don't start to introduce actual impulses until they're very close to having full range or they have full range and it's feeling really good,
Okay.
right? And then even then we'll, because impulses can be moderated in terms of intensity just simply by impulsing harder or less. Like if this is my impulse, that's different than just like that. But they're both technically an impulse, it's just different degrees of impulse. So the first couple times that I have someone do an impulse, the wording in the descriptions will be like, tap this at like 10% and just feel it out for today so that you can have some context of like, this is how my body responds the next day. And this is how it feels while I'm doing it. Because then that allows them to have a little more confidence to know This is how my body responds to that. And the next time that we do them, we can go into that thing with a little more intensity. Right. And that's anytime that I'm introducing any type of new exercise or new thing that we're doing specifically in a rehab, that's usually the way that I'm wording it or going about it, is like the first time that you do this thing, go easier than you think you need to go. And then we can progress into it next time when you have some more confidence in it, because that gives them the chance to feel like next day, this is what my body feels like. This is how it responded. This is the information that I'm getting. And then they can start to know a little bit better how their body actually responds to that.
I love that. Yeah. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. And I feel like if you even just switch that to something else, right? Like because I get people to do a lot of ISO holds, and like the progression is typically, if for instance it's a shoulder issue and they can only tolerate forces, like this position, the end goal is like, I want you to be able to just max effort at end range, right?
Yeah.
But it's like, in order to start, obviously we just need to get some kind of feedback and actually build some confidence. So it's the exact same thing, right? It's just like low intensity and then just build up. And I think that's something that's really, really useful, or perhaps underrated, with like something that is a lot more internally driven, which I feel like the impulse is, just like you said, right? You can choose to just, go light with it, or to actually hammer it. So like it's a very easy one to kind of gauge, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, it's sorry to cut you off there, but
No,
it's,
you could.
it's just it's getting communication from your body. That's all it is. It's communicating, like you call it feedback, right? It's if we have an individual who hasn't used their shoulder with any intent on figuring out how their shoulder works in 5 years,
Mhm.
they're almost like not even aware that there's a shoulder there. It's just like, it's just like part of my body, and I can kind of like whatever, you know.
Right.
But
Yeah,
until
yeah.
we actually use it, move it with intent of like feeling this is how you move it, this is how you want to move it, this is where you are compared to how you want to move it. Like we literally just start to communicate with the body so that the person can actually become more aware of like, oh, I can control this thing, you know. And that's probably a
Right.
little more of like that might not be athletes, that might be more of like an older population or a different population that isn't training hard. But like there's that principle applies. Someone that is immediately post-op is going to be similar to that because they have a completely new configuration in their body. Like somebody or something came in, changed the way their body was. They've never used that before. And so now all we're doing is we're trying to map that, get feedback with it, get communication with it so that it can actually be understood what's there. Very similar to someone that hasn't moved or trained with any intent for 5 years. Like that's what we're doing, is reintegrating them into, you have this stuff, this tissue that you can use again.
Yeah. That makes sense, especially in that context. I never even, to be honest, I didn't even think about it in that way. Like, someone actually comes in and just changes the configuration of like what's kind of going on there. I like
Yeah.
um that makes a lot of sense. Do you find that like, I imagine this is a bit more of like a multifaceted thing, and also you're not just doing impulses, there's like other stuff happening. So it might be perhaps like tricky to answer in seclusion. But do you find that, like, because obviously with that change in configuration and injury or post-op, there's always like a lot of like that kind of inhibition going on, right? Like we got a joint injury, the body's like, well, fuck putting force into that, we just want to move away from that. um Impulses to me just seems like a really nice intent way to specifically get force into that area. But do you find that it helps quite well, or is quite effective for actually calming down the inhibition and just being able to get that force driving in around those muscles again?
Yeah, well, I mean, like you said, there's multiple factors that go into that, and so for me, it starts with understanding there is a reason that there's inhibition there. When you had the injury, or when the person had the injury, when the person had the surgery, that is a direct threat to the survival of that being, of that organism, whatever, right?
Mhm.
And so it is a very correct response to try to lock it down and protect you, because it's like, no, don't do that. The last time you did that, you got hurt, so we don't want you to do that anymore. And so it's a very correct response to have the inhibition there. So I think that's important to understand, because then the athlete or the client or whoever it is can start out with the understanding of like, it's not like I have to try to fight against my body. This is the reason that it's presenting, is because it's trying to help me, protect me. I
Mhm.
understand that. Now what I want to do through rehab or through training is be able to show it that like, yes, this happened in the past. This is where we're at now. And we can prepare them or move them to a degree where they understand that like, I no longer need to lock this down. So that starts with, if we go back to the surgery example, like that might start with just moving it 2 inches. Like that is the amount that the body feels ready to do, that it's not scared to do, and that's what we do at that time. As it progresses through and as we get to more and more, like eventually what we want to do is we want to be able to reintegrate that person back into whatever their life is, whether it's a sport or whether it's picking up their kids or whatever it is, right? And so like at the end of a rehab, we want to be able to, in a controlled manner in training, go over that level of intensity or volume or stress that they would want to be able to handle in their life or in their sport, so that they can then fully understand the body no longer needs to present this inhibition anymore. And so like your question was about impulses. Impulses are certainly, they're certainly part of that process. They're not the entirety of that process. Like it's, as we kind of open the conversation with, it's a way to put force into your body. It's a way to put stimulus into your system, a way to put stimulus into your tissue. And if we understand that, then we can kind of create context around whatever, right? So it's just like, all we're doing with that specific one is we're putting some amount of force in very rapidly. There's a spike and then it goes down. There's a spike and then it goes down, right? That's one type of force that we want our body to be able to handle. We also want our body to be able to handle like heavy loads. We want it to be able to handle, moving maybe smoothly and easily without necessarily having a lot of impact. There's a lot of different ways that we want our body and our system to be able to move. Impulse is one of them. It's just, I think it's very important because it is a high level of intensity, and often it's seen as like, it looks like it's dangerous, but your life or sport is going to be dangerous if we don't prepare you for it. And so this is just like a controlled way to do that. And it's, it's definitely a massive part of a rehab or of let's say like de-inhibiting the area so that it knows that it can handle movement, it can handle force again.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like disinhibiting the inhibitor, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I like that. But yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, at the end of the day, it's like you can't like, it's really hard. I feel like it's really hard. I kind of make this argument a lot. It is hard to fuck yourself up in a controlled environment, you know, in that sense, or harder to do that than obviously in your sport where there's chaos involved. And because I work with a lot of grapplers,
Mm-hmm.
like I mean, yeah, it's literally like joints being ripped at end range,
Yeah.
sometimes people don't want to tap, falling body weight, all this lovely stuff. It's like there's so much there that's outside of our control. And it sometimes it catches me off guard. I'll hear people saying, even in the change rooms after practice or something, they're just like, yeah, I don't really lift, I don't really want to take on the risk of like injuries and so on. I'm just like, man, what the fuck? You're doing the absolute wrong thing if
Well, it's
you want to mitigate risk of injury. This is you're
mm-hmm.
doing a combat sport, and then ignoring preparing your body for the combat sport. So yeah, it's always an interesting take.
I mean, I just think it's a miseducation on what training is, though, at that point.
Yeah.
Because it's like training shouldn't necessarily be something where you're beating your body down.
Right.
I mean, the best way that I've heard it described is we want to train hard. We want to train, like, let's say if we just take till fail, for example, but we want to do that while in position. So we want to do that in a way in which it's not detrimental to our body, but we're actually train ourselves for how we want to fail and be able to not break when we do fail and be able to be in the position that we want to be in when we fail. Right. So it's like, can you push yourself to the level where you can no longer do it, but still be in the position that you want to do it within training?
Right. Okay.
And so that then becomes different than going to train hard and you create a shoulder injury from your training, or you create a hip injury from your training, or whatever that thing is, right? Because then, yes, that then does look like more risk. And I just think that that's a lot of there isn't the education around how to actually train and how to listen to your body and use your body when you're training to make it preparation versus something that will make an individual just feel like sore and hurt and whatever. And so I think that's why there's that kind of like connotation around it, is just, it's a miseducation and a misunderstanding of how to actually train.
Yeah, that makes sense. I suppose as well, like a nice like, or I think a nice addition would be injuring yourself in the pursuit of improving, your physical tissues is also going to boil down to statistics that, there might just be a time where you're just incredibly unlucky. And something does happen in that kind of controlled setting, right? Because you're literally pushing your body.
I don't like that.
Limits. Say again?
I said, I don't like that.
Oh no, okay.
Well, no, I mean, I don't. I don't like the unlucky part,
Okay,
or
okay,
the
yeah,
like.
fair
There's
enough.
just some because, and I'll tell you why. I'm not trying to just like be like no,
Nah, do it, go for it.
but for me, it's like there is a very specific reason that if something happens, there's a reason that that happened. There is nothing that can't be traced down to where it came from.
Okay.
And so I
Yeah.
think an individual, or I guess I start with myself. I think I have the ability to be aware enough at all times to know how much I should push and how much I should pull back.
Okay.
Now, I will definitely say like um, part of that process, especially early on, may be sometimes you push yourself too hard and you get to the point where something does happen, and
Mm,
that is part of your learning and understanding process, right? But if it's understood as that is part of your process and not that not that it's unlucky or not that it just happens or it's like a 1 out of 1,000 chance and just happened to happen to you, like if that's not the viewpoint, but it's like it's rather a learning experience where I did push myself a little bit too hard and now I can learn, I can understand that, and I can take that as information moving forward, then I think it becomes beneficial. But if it's something that's just like seen as unlucky, then it's
mm,
like this injury is bad. I had no control over it and I hope it doesn't happen again.
right.
And that's not the scenario that I want to create.
I
Because
hear that.
for me, the ultimate is like having enough awareness, having enough ability, having enough like control to know exactly what I'm supposed to do, what I need to do at all times, and how my body can operate best to execute that thing. And I think
Mm,
that's achievable, but it's not achievable if I look at things as unlucky or just random.
sure. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. That makes sense. How if you were to place that in the context of your I think you would do it was like a seated good morning or something when you had that back injury.
Yes.
Um, how how would you relate to that with regards to your awareness at the time, or perhaps, the learning curve that you mentioned, like after
Mm-hmm.
on reflection? What was that like for you, and what do you feel like was going on there that maybe put you in that position where injury occurred?
Yeah, so I wasn't as present as I could or should have been at that time because specifically at that time I had there's just a lot of things that I had going on. Like I basically had to be done training at an earlier time in the day than I normally needed to, or I need to have all my work done at an earlier time of the day than I normally needed to because of something else that I was doing. And
Mm,
so I just had a lot of stuff that was stacked up. And so when I got into the training session, I wasn't fully into the training session because what happened was I had two calls like 15 minutes after I injured my back. And so I was trying to get through the training session, right, without really actually being present in what it was that I was doing. And so
right.
that's where just for me, I can look back at it and I can see and I can feel it. Like as I was going down, there's feedback that I was getting, but I wasn't making the change I wasn't addressing that and changing it while I was doing it. And that caused that force to go into that tissue. And then that caused that to happen.
Mm,
Right. And so the takeaway for me for that was like, I'm fucking like I'm Batman, but I'm not quite that Batman. like
mm,
like
mm,
the like natural laws still apply. Like I still, because it was a little bit like I don't know. Sometimes I don't know if this has happened for you. It's happened for me like kind of at that time. Like you start feeling really good and you feel so good that it's just like I don't have to I don't have to like pay attention as much to what I'm doing because I've just like built up so much buffering space that it just doesn't matter anymore.
right. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
I was a
Yeah.
little bit at that point, and then I like had that cognition and realization of like, no matter what created that thing in the first place is what I continue to do to keep on like building that buffer for it to just
Mm,
get better and better and better and better and better versus like changing it. So now it's like now it's more when or if my body's feeling really good, I'm not going to take that as I built up enough buffer. I can kind of like just go do what I want now. It's like, no, I'm still putting as much intention, as much awareness. I'm still putting all of that into it so that I can continue to build that because I've learned that when I don't, then that's what can happen.
right.
Right. So that was, it's funny you asked about that specific time because I think I made a post on it where I don't know if I put it in the post, but like I remember specifically being like, okay, I wasn't as fully in this training session as I could have been or should have been.
Mm.
And that's what happened. That's what caused that.
Yeah, that makes sense. I
Yeah.
suppose with the wrist one might just be that perhaps the brick should have been cemented down a little bit
the
better.
wrist, the wrist one, man. Yeah. What? Yeah. So I jumped up and I made it, and I just like the first time I just hopped back off the
Okay.
bricks.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I went again the second time because I was like, I want to actually stand up on them this time.
Oh,
And
okay.
so that's what like I went to stand up, like press up into them to stand up, and then they
Yeah.
slid out, and then that's when I fell over. So that was uh I don't know. that was
Yeah,
just
yeah,
that one
yeah.
was like yeah, I suppose me not taking all the variables into account.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Fair. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like too aware of my own body that I forgot about the external environment.
The bricks.
The
Yeah.
bricks, man, it gets us in the end. Um,
Yeah.
no, it's interesting what you say because I've injured my lower back before from deadlifting, and I feel like just after you said all that, like completely resonate with what you mean because I got into a point in my training where I was pushing things or I felt good, and I had around that time I'd broken a bit of a barrier in terms of the intensity I was able to push. So like before that point, whenever I was doing max efforts, it just felt like I would have like an insane, kind of like nervous system crash where it's like, fucking hell, I'm done, for the day type thing. Like really fatigued, and then it's like struggle to do the session the day after and stuff like that, right? And then there was a time period where I miscalculated what I was supposed to do in the session. I was supposed to work up to like a trap bar deadlift 3 rep max, and then I was supposed to do back offsets. And the way it was programmed for me at the time was um, pull triples until you fail. And what I did was is I worked up to a weight that I was like, oh, that wasn't really a 3 rep max, but it was kind of close. And I saw I had back offsets, so I was like, let me just crack on with the back offsets. But that was a mistake, right? Because that led the fact that I wasn't fatigued meant that I had to, I think I did like 21 triples with like 150 kg, and then I finally failed. And it was like, this took me fucking ages. So like a bit after that, that was kind of for me, that was like that showed me, oh shit, I have really gotten to a point where I can push intensity now, and it feels like my body can actually continue with this quite nicely. Uh,
Mhm.
and it was like a bit after that that I just had another normal session. It was like, I don't know, 3/8, right, with trap bar deadlift. And it was the last set. And I remember just like the rep 5 or something. I just dropped it. And then when I went to pull, my mind went somewhere else. And I didn't try to pull from a position I was familiar with, or I didn't try to like bring awareness to my back and where I'm tying something. And I just kind of pulled, like yanked from a relaxed position. And then I felt something, go in my lower back. So it made a lot of sense as to why that happened. It was like the way I looked at it was I didn't I rushed it and I pulled from a position I was less experienced with, less able to handle the load. But I didn't really like think about the cognitive aspect as much, like the fact that my mind did go somewhere else and I did, and that probably led to me rushing it and not really being in tune with what was going on. So it's interesting what you say when get luck out of the way. It's not really that. It's a bit more like what is actually happening and how are you able to kind of bring that with the intent and everything.
Yeah, well, like our attention or our awareness is basically what we are, what we have,
Mm,
right? Because, um, I mean, an individual's attention, awareness, and intention, that is what creates what physically shows up. Because if my attention isn't on something, there's no chance of me creating.
mm,
If I don't have some awareness of a thing that could happen, there is no way for me to connect where I'm at to that thing,
right.
right? So it's like the attention, the awareness, all like that is basically what we have to direct, and then what we physically do just follows that.
Yeah.
And so if that's gone, or if that's somewhere else, that is then going to impact what physically happens or what physically gets done.
Mm, that makes sense. Yeah,
Yeah.
that makes sense. Um, little bit of a like going into something else. I'm aware of the time as well, so like if we can't
Yeah,
dive
we,
in
we have like
too much.
4 minutes or so. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was, I guess, like quick question on your programming or how you like to, I guess more so like what you like to kind of write. Like if you've put an exercise and it's like the information that you kind of want to have in, like what you kind of write. Um, what's your kind of goal with what you write? I guess like how much you write terms, because I did watch like the video you did where it's like kind of bringing the program to life, right? And I
Hmm.
suppose what I'm getting at is like let's say for instance, if I give an example, like you gave me a joint move for the hip, and you I guess the goal is for me to just like hit a certain amount of reps, but then you might want me to be aware of certain things. What would you kind of like write for that for me to, I guess, look at, or what would an example kind of look like?
Well, the description is going to be me putting myself in the exercise on that specific day and knowing what I want to feel out of that. So, like, let's say it's that joint move example, and let's say the goal is, let's say the specific set and rep scheme is like 1 set till satisfied, right? I may then describe till satisfied in this case means before you do the exercise, you have set the intention and the feeling of what the hip of what you want to have at the hip, and you simply keep going until you get that. So it's cool because like that might be the description, right? And it's cool because what it causes you to do is before you even start the move, you're like, okay, like how do I want my hip to feel? And sometimes that's not necessarily something that someone has ever asked themselves. And it's like, okay, so it causes you to then, again, this goes back to the intention, the awareness, the creation piece. Is like, if I can kind of put out there, this is how it is that I want my hip to feel. I then come back to present time when I'm doing the moves, and then I create that future thing as I'm doing the moves. And then eventually I get to that point. And when I'm at that point, then that's when I'm satisfied. That's when I'm good. That's when I'm go on to the next move. Right.
Interesting. Yeah.
So it's just like that's how I use the descriptions. Is I personally know what I'd want to get out of the exercise in that specific day in that specific way that we're using them, and then I'm going to type that out in the descriptions in the best way that I can, or the best way that I know how to get the individual that's doing them on the other end to understand it.
Right.
Versus it just being like 1 set till satisfied. And sometimes I'll leave it super simple, like 1 set till satisfied. You determine what satisfied means today. So
Okay.
there's different ways that we can do it, but that was just one specific example of how I might write up
Sure.
a description there.
Yeah. That sounds like it kind of makes it a little bit more interactive as well, I suppose, right? Like someone gets to kind of bring themselves to the program. They get to kind of dictate what they're going to do to a certain degree.
Yeah, well, which I think is important because if I'm going to talk about being able to engage all aspects of yourself, I need to also be able to help provide some context around what that means.
Right.
Like, okay, what does it mean to engage intellectually or emotionally or whatever? Like, I need to be able to provide some type of context so that the individual understands how to do that and what that means. And
Yeah.
that's the descriptions are one way to do that, especially in remote programming. Like that is pretty much the main way to do that and communicate that.
Yeah. I think that's something that's you could say is like lacking, or something that's easy to lack, given
Mm-hmm.
the circumstance of an online program. No, that's awesome, man. Thank you. Appreciate
Yeah,
your time answering the questions. It was good to chat to you, man.
you too, man.
All right.
Appreciate you yeah, taking the time as well. So
Yeah, my pleasure. My pleasure.
all right, dude.
Have a good one. Have a good
You
rest of
too.
your day.
Thank you. Pieces.
Take care, man. Bye.